The most fortified prison in Mexico, Puente Grande, had a prisoner-to-guard ratio of 1 to 2. This meant there were 2 guards for every prisoner, which was, honestly, absurd and quite unusual. However, this institution was reserved for Mexico's most violent offenders, including those drug cartel leaders. Not your regular criminals, these commanders had private armies with tens of thousands of followers, all armed with every major weapon you could think of. So it's no surprise that they attacked the prisons suddenly. The jail walls were reinforced with hefty concrete and the strongest steel imaginable. Guards with the most powerful weaponry stood watch from the towers. Every road leading to the prison was checked and inspected thoroughly. It really was like a military base, this prison. El Chapo, Mexico's most notorious and deadliest drug lord, was imprisoned here. He led the world's most violent drug gang, the Sinaloa cartel. The Sinaloa cartel, by the way, is named after its home state, Sinaloa, in Mexico. After a violent chase across Mexico, he was finally caught for the first time back in 1993. El Chapo managed to run his empire from prison despite being captured. His empire thrived while he was imprisoned. How did he pull this off? Well, through bribes. He bribed every prison official and guard with millions. This made his life in jail comfortable, almost like being outside. He could order wine, women, and food whenever he pleased. His 2 wives and his mistresses could visit him for days on end. He also had access to phones and all sorts of communication gadgets to manage his cartel from within the prison walls. Damaso Lopez, who was Puente Grande prison's deputy security chief, helped Chapo a great deal. Chapo bought him off with a house, a car, gifts, and a substantial monthly salary. Over time, strong bonds formed between them, and they became friends. Damaso was the main reason Chapo lived like a king in prison, able to do whatever he wanted. Remember Damaso? He'll pop up unexpectedly later in the story. He ran his cartel from prison, right? But don't think for a second that he didn't come up with a new drug smuggling method while locked up. His cartel actually revolutionized underground tunnel smuggling, even though it wasn't his original creation. He had engineers, architects and specialists design and build professional tunnels. He gave Damaso a house, a car, presents, and a hefty monthly paycheck, and they became buddies after forming a strong friendship. Damaso made El Chapo feel like a king in prison, able to do anything he fancied. Remember this, Damaso. He's going to show up in an unexpected way later in the story. Chapo managed his cartel from inside those walls, and while in prison he invented a novel drug smuggling system. Even though it wasn't his own innovation, his cartel truly revolutionized underground tunnel smuggling. He hired expert tunnel builders, engineers, architects and specialists. Top-notch organization, really. These tunnels targeted America, which was the golden goose of revenues. Chapo and his gang began importing drugs underground instead of by air, sea or land. This move boosted their smuggling operations to about $20 million a month. And imagine that, his empire actually grew more while he was in prison than when he was outside. Chapo also benefited from Mexico's refusal, back in the 1990s, to extradite drug cartel leaders like him to America, even though America wanted it because, well, they were the most harmed. The countries most affected are the ones where the most drugs are entering, so America consistently demanded the extradition of El Chapo and other leaders, since American prisons are stronger and would be far away from their men, their gangs, and those bribe-taking officials. They simply couldn't manage their gangs there. However, Mexican officials rejected this and claimed they could handle their own criminals. In 2001, the Mexican Supreme Court suggested a new statute that would authorize the extradition of select Mexican convicts to America. Since he could do anything in prison, El Chapo felt comfortable. Of course, he liked being outside, but the situation wasn't horrible, so he wasn't trying to escape or even thinking about it. After hearing the Supreme Court may extradite some offenders to America, he sensed scared and stated, "No, this won't work. We need an exit." The prison escape he planned had to be performed promptly. Within weeks, he had a detailed plan and started executing it. El Chapo handed his friend Damaso, the jail deputy security director, a large bribe and told him to escape since he knew he had to involve the fewest people possible. He wanted to be outside, but the situation was so horrible that he wasn't even trying to flee. Upon hearing that the Supreme Court may extradite some convicts to the US, he felt the risk and exclaimed, "No way, we need to find a way out." He planned his prison escape, which had to be done promptly. Within weeks, he had a detailed plan and started executing it. El Chapo realized he had to involve as few people as possible, so he heavily bribed his friend Damaso, the prison's deputy security director, and told him to flee. No problem, you and I. Imagine that this is the deputy director of security of Mexico's strongest prison. If corruption exists inside, what good is external strength and fortification? They decided that Damaso would lower guards on January 19th, 2001, Chapo's escape day. He lowered guards across the prison, not just in Chapo's area. He also bribed prison worker Chito. Chito helped wash clothing. He collected soiled clothes from prisoners in a cart and took them outside the prison to a van that took them to the laundry. Because he was an ordinary worker who did his job daily, no guard noticed Chito, making him the appropriate pick. The prison and loaded everything into a van for the laundry. Chito was the appropriate pick because he was an ordinary worker who did his everyday job without notice from the guards. On January 19th, 2001, Chito unlocked El Chapo's cell and helped him onto the dirty laundry cart, concealing him. There were few guards in that section, so they did everything without problems. Chito was pushing the cart when he reached a gate with a guard. Chito left the cart to talk to the guard. He told him to open the gate, but Chapo's weight made the cart move backward. He worried the cart would strike the wall, turn over and catch him. His friend soon followed up, sprinted after the cart, and stopped it before it hit the wall or anything else. He left for the jail parking lot where the automobile was. Entering the trunk, he started the car and left prison. The automobile was driven by a dishonest Chapo prison officer. After leaving the outer gates, no one stopped or searched the automobile. Even though the escape was swiftly discovered, the pursuit was delayed because, well, about half of the local police were in Chapo's pocket, so they didn't immediately chase, which gave him just enough time to get away from the prison. However, federal forces, who are, a bit harder to bribe than the local police, learned of the escape. The feds started chasing. Just a little distance outside the prison, Chapo's guys were waiting for him. Someone hurriedly swapped cars and put him in an armoured vehicle. They then brought him to a chopper for transport. His new armoured automobile was waiting. Nearly half of the local cops were actually in El Chapo's jeep, which delayed the chase even more. He may get far from the prison. After the escape, federal forces, which again are harder to bribe than the local police, learned about it. Federal soldiers launched a pursuit. Naturally, El Chapo's guys were waiting outside the prison very close. They swiftly switched him to an armoured vehicle when he arrived. He then boarded a helicopter and was taken to another location. His new armoured automobile was waiting. They transferred him 4 times by land and air, making tracking him, well, extremely impossible. His final automobile transported him to Mexico City, the capital. Chapo spotted police cars and motorcycles approaching from the rear window as they drove down the street after their long detour. Worried, he asked his driver how they were catching up and how they knew their whereabouts. How they were catching up and how they knew their whereabouts. The driver replied, "Don't worry, boss, these are our police." Chapo breathed deeply and relaxed. Just imagine Chapo driving across the capital with an escort of police cars and motorcycles like a president. These unscrupulous police kept decent police from approaching him. El Chapo was, quite unexpectedly, in a police convoy. They drove with him to a cartel safe house or headquarters. He became famous for his 2001 escape. Many believed he was above the law and the system. Despite extensive efforts, the Mexican government failed to catch him. Chapo was free for 14 years. He moved between secret safe houses, many in remote mountain locales over these years. El Chapo's empire increased rapidly during these 14 years. He began importing billions of dollars of cocaine into the United States, extending his gang and their Mexican authority to new levels. He established the Sinaloa cartel as the largest drug trafficking organization in history, even surpassing Escobar's Medellin cartel. Naturally, such size, influence and control demanded considerable violence, especially in those northern Mexican cities along the United States border where most of the smuggling took place. His cartel turned these communities into war zones, producing unprecedented destruction and carnage in Mexico's gang world. El Chapo destroyed rival cartels and ruled the north. He virtually completely controlled the Mexican to American narcotics traffic. The Mexican and American authorities, well, they were using their most powerful resources to arrest him at all costs. By 2014, El Chapo had escaped prison 14 years earlier. With American assistance, the intelligence agencies adopted a new strategy. They chose El Chapo's children, wives and close acquaintances because they knew him best. This technique got them to El Chapo's assistant, the cartel's IT guy, a 20-something Colombian. The spy agencies, they turned this young man as a tool. They broke into his cartel's encrypted communication network with his help. This allowed them to locate El Chapo. With American aid, Mexico adopted a new strategy. They targeted El Chapo through his children, spouses and close colleagues because, well, they knew him best. They reached El Chapo's aide and the gang's IT and tech person with this method, a 20-something Colombian male. The spy agencies turned this young man as a tool. They broke El Chapo's encrypted communication network with his help. This allowed them to locate El Chapo in a residence in one of his state's gang's hubs. A safe house was intended to be here. The cartel's headquarters was a residence in one of the state's regions. This house was supposed to be safe, so they found it. Mexican and United States Special Forces teamed together on February 17, 2014. The Drug Enforcement Administration surrounded and attacked the residence. This house was unusual since the main door featured a steel second door. Special soldiers hit this door to smash it. While Chapo slept in the house, his helper screamed that the Mexican army was at the door. Chapo got out of bed when the door banged. The door banged outside as he lay in bed. He got up and moved. Forces trying to shatter the steel door could see individuals rushing around inside the house through the windows. They pounded the door harder. Everything in the house was armoured, and the windows were small, making them hard to open. The door was their sole concern. No door remained when they surrounded the house. They kept banging till they broke it. They attacked the house with weapons drawn, shouting and ordering everyone inside to surrender and lie down. The unexpected discovery was that no one was home. The house was empty after they examined every nook and corner. Despite seeing movement inside the house when they tried to break the door, where did El Chapo and the others go? El Chapo stood up and ran to the bathroom when the aide alerted him. What made him run to the bathroom? To flee, not hide. He would escape by tunnel. The gang specialized in tunneling. Imagine they weren't. The stunning discovery was that no one was in the house when ordered to surrender and lie on the ground. Even though they noticed someone moving inside the house when they were outside trying to burst the door, they checked every room and corner but found no one. Where did Chapo and his companions go? Chapo promptly stood up and ran to the bathroom when a worker alerted him. What made him run to the bathroom? To flee, not hide. He would escape by tunnel. The gang specialized in tunneling. Imagine building escape paths under safe residences as well as smuggling tunnels. Imagine the safe houses where Chapo, their commander, hid. Tunnels were dug under each dwelling. Chapo escaped using a bathtub tunnel. Actual photo of the tunnel when Mexican forces discovered it. The cleverly built entryway was only visible to those who knew about it. This secret entry required a pin in a little hole behind the bathroom mirror. This would generate an electric current that opened the door. They dug escape routes under safe houses and smuggling tunnels. Imagine all the safe houses their commander Chapo used. Each residence has a tunnel beneath it, so he could escape if surrounded. Chapo escaped using a bathtub tunnel. Actual photo of the tunnel when Mexican forces discovered it. The cleverly built entryway was only visible to those who knew about it. This secret entry required a pin in a little hole behind the bathroom mirror. This would generate an electric current that would unlock the bathtub lock. Lock the bathtub, then lift it with your hands. The bathtub rises effortlessly because hydraulic arms support it from underneath. Chapo pulled and closed the bathtub as he entered the tunnel. The raiders searched the house for a long time before finding this secret entry. Chapo escaped slowly with his wife, assistant and cook. The special troops uncovered the tunnel after Chapo and his companions had fled. After his escape, Chapo went to a routine area where no one would suspect him. He proceeded to Mazatlan, a tourist city on the sea, instead of one of the safe places or secluded houses in the highlands. But he didn't realize that the Mexican military had penetrated the communication network and found the residence he escaped from by mistake. He didn't think they could trace him anywhere. 5 days after his escape from the residence, on February 22, 2014, Mexican and American investigators found him at Miramar Hotel in this coastal city. They easily surrounded and arrested him in his hotel room. It was surprising that they found him so easily, because honestly he didn't know how they were tracking him. He had no idea his phone and network were compromised. I hope you liked the video, by the way. Long videos like this take a lot of work, so please give it a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. And, subscribe and click the bell if you're new to the channel. Let's proceed. Now, El Chapo won't be taken to Puente Grande again after his second arrest. This time, El Altiplano, which is Mexico's strongest prison, will receive him. Okay? You might be wondering, all right, if this is the strongest prison in Mexico, why didn't they take him there the first time? Well, that's because they originally arrested him in 1993. The Altiplano prison had just opened, and honestly, it wasn't fortified like it was in 2014 when they caught him again. The first time, it was straight to prison. With its guards, weapons and equipment, this prison was basically like a military fortress. The outside wall is ringed by many watchtowers, each with 3 or 4 heavily armed troops. The mesh prison walls are layered. Yeah, the first layer is followed by a second mesh layer, and sometimes even a third. These meter-thick mesh layers are reinforced and fortified. Some even have ditches in front of them. As I mentioned, the criminals imprisoned here have their own armies, so they really have to be prepared for an external invasion, and that's why they have all these fortifications. And man, this prison even has armoured cars. In addition, the prison is barred from flying saucers, and there are claims they have anti-aircraft weapons for aerial attacks. It's crazy. Mobile phones and communication networks don't work inside the prison. All calls are landline, ground-based. And most importantly, this prison's officials and guards are carefully recruited, making bribery really difficult. The most notorious Mexican criminals and gang leaders have never escaped the prison. He started planning an escape as soon as he reached prison, because he was worried the Mexican authorities would send him over to the United States. And well, everything would end. So, he could only reach out to the outside world through his visitors since, phones and communication networks were completely banned in prison. His lawyer was one of just 2 people allowed. The second was Oscar Lopez's third wife, a 32-year-old lady he married back in 2007. Chapo began working with her to communicate with his children and followers outside. Now his 4 offspring led his gang, each one with its own story. And, well, some of them caused huge problems in Mexico. Maybe you heard about them in the news. Just imagine for a moment if these kids weren't gang leaders. Someone outside the family became his right hand after Chapo. Who is this man? I mentioned him before, and yeah, I encouraged you to remember him because he will return in an unexpected way. As a former security chief in one of Mexico's strongest prisons, Damaso knew the prison system inside out and how security worked. This gave him a real advantage in planning. However, Chapo spent most of his prison time locked up in his cell. He could only go out for an hour a day, and he always had a GPS tracker on his leg, so they always knew his location. Even worse, his cell was monitored by cameras 24/7, just to make sure he was never out of their sight. Although his shower was behind a tiny wall for privacy, he was still monitored around the clock. Privacy, yet the man is monitored 24/7. Taboo knew escaping this place was nearly impossible, but honestly, he would do it at any cost. Naturally, Taboo and his gang's plan included a tunnel. But how and from where would they dig? It was necessary to dig the tunnel from outside the prison to the inside, possibly the first time in history. You often hear about inmates digging tunnels to escape, but a prisoner having his followers dig a tunnel from outside to enter? Nothing like it has ever happened before. The concept began with buying land near the prison. The prison could be reached by digging a tunnel, but it really shouldn't be too close, or it might attract guards and security. El Chapo's prison was isolated by these wide agricultural regions. The large building stood in a flat area, with no other buildings nearby. After quite a long search, El Chapo's group found an unoccupied building site about 1.5 kilometers from the prison, probably used by local farmers. At this stage, it was just the building's early phases, really just bricks. They registered this land under a name that wouldn't arouse suspicions after buying it from its owners. Unsuspicious. Now, they own this land and can start digging the tunnel. The issue was, well, a bit more complicated. How would they locate their leader's cell? In addition, the cell had a 24-hour security camera watching Chapo. How would they escape his cell without being discovered if the gang dug the tunnel? The only location in the cell partially obscured from the camera was the shower. They added a tiny partition to provide Chapo privacy when bathing, literally, except this place wasn't watched. So this is where the tunnel needs to be opened. But how can they dig 1.5 kilometers deep without seeing anything and open a hole here? Upon reflection, one declares it impossible. Just reaching his cell would be amazing, but they must reach a precise point. Which difficult problem must they solve? The trouble is that Chapo had a great plan to help the men find his cell, notably the small shower room where the tunnel must reach. The aim was to use a leg-mounted GPS. Simple plan. The lads would carry a GPS gadget into prison and Chapo would switch it on and position it under the showerhead. Men digging the tunnel beneath would know the exact location. The idea was great, but getting the device into prison was difficult. Mexico's most secure jail is Tiplano. Getting anything into prison was nearly impossible. About 6 checkpoints await you when you enter the prison. You must cross each checkpoint undetected. Any tool-like item cannot be brought in. His leg-mounted GPS device gave it to him. Simple plan. The men would smuggle a GPS device into prison and Tabo, switch it on and put it under the showerhead. Men digging the tunnel beneath would know the exact location. The idea was great, but getting the device into prison was difficult. The Tijuana prison is Mexico's strongest, making smuggling nearly impossible. About 6 checkpoints await you when you enter the prison. Each checkpoint must be passed without detection, and weapons and tools cannot be carried in. Help escape or use as a weapon. Chapo came up with another great idea. He instructed his wife to inform the gang to install the GPS in a wristwatch. Regular watches can pass through all prison and outside checkpoints. My wife smuggled and gave him the watch undetected. Nobody suspected it because it was only a watch and harmless. That's what guards thought. This watch and its GPS helped Chapo's crew locate the tunnel-digging site. Now that they knew the exact position, Chapo's crew could accurately aim their tunnel digging toward the prison. They specialized in tunneling, which was a feat of engineering. Tunnel digging was their specialty, thus they guided the work precisely. This engineering project was fantastic and professional. And here we have come to the end of the first part of the most crazy story about one of the largest men of the Colombian cartels. Wait for me in the second part, where I will complete to you how the police were able to catch him and made his cartels have no meaning in a way full of distinctive plots. Greetings to you and these other clips.